Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming back. I hope you had a lovely lunch. We had a very good session with Cindy earlier, and I'm going to follow up on that. I'm going to try and not repeat things that Cindy covered earlier. I'm going to look more at the structure of a learning support department, and I'm going to use the term learning support department for the purpose of the presentation, and that will cover SEN, it will cover support for learning. It doesn't particularly cover ESL, as learning support SEN is slightly separate, although it does overlap at times. But when I use the terms learning support, I'm referring to SEN and support for learning, okay, and additional needs. I chose the title Holistic Learning Support for Global Citizens because I was tying in with the theme of today, global citizenship, and also to emphasize the point that all of our learners will be global citizens, and we are preparing them to be part of a global community in the future. They are at the moment part of the community, and they will go on to be hopefully very productive citizens within a global context. Okay, so that's why I chose that title. Okay. So when we think about learning support and support for learning, I want to think about it in a broader context in terms of supporting holistic development for every child, supporting all of their needs, their social, their personal, their communication, their physical, their cognitive, all aspects of their development. So I'm not just limiting it to academics or achievement in tests or in class, but more to do with their personal, social, emotional, cognitive well-being and development as well. Okay, and that's, I suppose, where we should be focusing our measure of success, and our progress indicators would be at the holistic nature of the child's development as opposed to just their academics. Okay? Now, why do we want to come here and talk about these things and listen to each other? Well, because we need to try and encourage some consistency throughout Dubai. Everybody is coming from different schools, different demographic, different socioeconomic groups, different language groups and cultural groups. So we need to try and bring some baseline of consistency with regard to how we provide for children with SEN and additional needs, and to improve our own standards and to get the best out of ourselves. Okay? So if we think about Dubai and what we have here, it's obviously a very dynamic, it's a very impressive city where anything is achievable. And when we think about SEN and additional needs within mainstream and inclusion, it can seem like an insurmountable task at times, that the challenge is too great, there are too many obstacles, too many limitations, too many challenges with regard to inclusion and particular settings. But if we use Dubai as our benchmark, then we know that anything is possible, and we have to think about small steps, and we need to think about what's possible and what's realistic and work towards that. And ultimately, we could end up with something which is quite unimaginable and very impressive. Okay? So things to consider, and this is my focus for the session today. What does a successful learning support department consist of? And why are some schools more successful in implementing support for SEN within the mainstream setting? Or perhaps they just appear to be more successful. So what is it that brings it together to make it a successful working department? Okay, and I suppose by using the word department, I'm almost limiting it, because it's not for the responsibility of the department alone, but it's actually a school-wide initiative. Okay, and the inclusion has to be school-wide, and it has to be driven by the school as a whole. Okay, but at the heart of that, you're going to have a very effective learning support department as well. Okay? Now, something I'd like you to do before we start, just to give you an indication of how other schools are working, I want you to consider these three questions. How many SEN specialists are employed in your school? Now, if you are a parent or you're not actually working in education at the moment, think about your last school, think about your child's school. How many people are specifically employed to support additional needs within that school? How many pupils are enrolled in the school in total? And how often does the SENCO or a member of the learning support team meet with the senior leadership team, assistant head, deputy head, head teacher, or the registrar, or the school governor, board of directors? Does it happen? How often does it happen? Okay, so just think about those things in your own context, and now I'd like you just to turn around, turn to the person beside you, ask them what's the situation in their school. So we'll just do about 3 minutes for that. If you can ask maybe 2-3 people around you and just get a feel for their school. Okay? Okay, so in your school, how many students do you have?
We have actually 19 students.
How many?
With the report, we have 19 students.
How many children in your school?
It's 2,000 students.
How many people employed for SEN?
SEN 3.
Okay. How often does one of those 3 people meet with the senior leadership team?
It's only one.
Okay, how often? Once a week, once a month, once a term?
Once a week.
Once a week. And who do they meet with?
Sorry?
Who do they meet with?
Supervisors.
Who is the supervisor?
We have 3 supervisors in that middle session, primary session, and that secondary session.
Okay, so the person from the learning support team, they meet with the supervisor once a week.
Yeah.
Okay, for each department or just for primary?
Each department.
Okay.
And HODs also we have.
Say that again?
HODs, head of the session also we have.
Okay, so they meet with them once a week. Okay, so you've got 3,000 people? No, 2,000 and 3 people employed. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I just, yeah, sure. Okay, and thank you for sharing. I had the chance to speak to one lady here, and she told me there's 2,000 children in her school. There are 3 people employed for SEN. One person of that team meets with a supervisor once a week. So that's an indication of one school. Another example, I'll give you another school. 7 people employed, 650 children in the school. Weekly meetings with 3 different members of SLT. Okay? So they're very simple questions, and it's not a thorough investigation into how the school works, but it gives an indication into the priority of SEN within the school. And there needs to be a strong support-student ratio to make it work, to make it effective. Otherwise, you have an impossible task ahead of you. How do you change that if it's not correct? You need to have open lines of communication with your senior managers, and they need to be aware of what the demands are, and that can only happen if you're meeting regularly, if they're involved and they're aware of the specific cases, the spread and the depth of those needs. Okay? Now, I just said how many children in total in the school because I think that's important. If people start getting into how many on the SEN register, then you're narrowing your view and you're limiting perhaps underlying needs that haven't been detected, and you're almost stopping that from happening if you're limiting yourself from the outset. You have to think how many children are in this school in total. Okay? All right, so some steps for success, and it's not limited. This is only my opinion. What I have reflected on and found has worked and is important, but there's lots more things that are also very important. So to start with, you need to have an informed staff with a collective vision. So your teachers, all teachers, need to be well informed. They need to be confident in dealing with children who have additional needs. That can come from experience, it can come from in-house training, it can come from asking external people to come in and lead sessions within your school. But it needs to be consistent. All members of staff need to be aware that it's their responsibility and they have a role to play. Okay? And the collective vision can really only come from your senior management. It needs to be built into the vision of your school and the ethos of your school that you are actively promoting positive inclusion. Okay? There needs to be an adequate learning support assistant or learning support teacher-pupil ratio. So that's what we just talked about earlier. Every school will define what that means to them, but it has to be realistic. And you have to take into account how many needs you're dealing with, how wide you're going to spread your support, and you'll have to think, are you getting enough coverage and depth to make it actually worthwhile and valuable support? Okay, so it may need to be more specific and targeted, or you might have the luxury of spreading it wider if you've got additional staff. There needs to be systematic procedures embedded in the practice which can withstand transition. And transition is transition of staff and pupils, because your team will move on, okay? And those systems have to be procedural, that the next person who comes in will pick up that system and continue with it and hopefully even improve it further, okay? And when I'm talking about procedures, I'm talking about admissions, assessment, screening, evidence gathering, record keeping. Okay, those systems have to be very systematic. They have to withstand somebody leaving, and then they'll still continue. It can't just fall apart if the main person or two people from the team leave. It has to be expected within the school that this is going to be carried on and this is what is happening. Okay, and it has to be maintained so you can have longitudinal data and you can review progress. All right. Now, you need to have the support, acknowledgement, collaboration of your SLT. There needs to be a sense of shared responsibility. It's too much on a SENCO to feel the weight of inclusion and the pressure of making it a success. It has to be a team approach. You have to work in collaboration with your managers and with the rest of the school. Okay, and they need to give you that time, they need to give you that support. The support can come in many ways. It can come in time, it can come in funding, it can come in awareness, it can come in promotion of your ethos and your vision, support for change, encouragement for new systems. Okay, but you can't do that alone, all right? And then there's some bonus elements which basically covers everything else that we can think of. Now I have limited it and I'll discuss them later. Okay, so the joint responsibility, this is among the whole staff. So class teachers, specialists, your department, senior leadership, it needs to be part of your school improvement plan. You need to feed into that, and you also need to have your own action plan for your department. Okay, there needs to be specific goals that you want to achieve within the year. You need to work out with your manager how they're going to be achieved and what you need to make that happen and what's the time frame. Okay, they don't have to be huge, it just has to be something to make progress and improvement within your setting. An inclusive mindset and an appreciation for difference. That's where your staff come in, where we respect difference, we celebrate diversity and also achievements of children apart from just the academics. Okay, so the whole child is nurtured and celebrated, especially in front of their peers, in lots of different ways. Okay. Now, I think for a lot of schools, the expectations on a child and on a family need to be fair and need to be realistic. It's not realistic to expect a child who is working 2 years below their year level to do the curriculum for that year level, and that was a question from this morning. It has to be tailored to meet the needs of the child. The school has to be flexible in that, and there needs to be allowances made for that. And at the same time, you are still showing progression because that child is progressing at their level. with their peers, not excluded or left behind, but with their peers, perhaps in a slightly differentiated way. Okay? And also families. There can be a lot of pressure on families to take outside agency support, which can be very expensive, and if you've got a child with multiple needs, they may need to see various different therapists, and that's a big burden financially on some families. So the school has to be fair in their expectation in terms of prioritising support that the child should get and what you might ask the parents for. Okay? And then flexibility among the staff in terms of how you deliver your support. Are you allowed to come into class? Will they work with you? Will they pre-plan with you? Will they discuss? Will they reflect afterwards? Are they allowing the children to be taken out to do some booster sessions? Because that obviously is going to take away from their time, which they feel is very important. So you have to have that partnership with the staff to say, yes, this is valuable, you can have them for this session, and also for them to say, yes, you're welcome to come into my class. Okay? But I suppose to make a staff understand that what you're doing is valuable, that only comes from sharing what you're doing. If you're just taking the child and not sharing, feeding back, showing progress, they're not going to understand why it is that you're taking them or for what, or the purpose. Okay, so that's all about effective communication with your staff, and that takes time, so you need to build that into your timetable as well. So you have to, when you're doing your timetabling, you need to allow for those feedback times being available for staff discussion and also with parents as well. Okay. So then we were talking about the systematic procedures that need to be embedded within the school. The paper trail, you need to have policy, a strong policy to back up what you're doing, to be very transparent about what the school is working towards. Everything needs to be documented as far as possible. Any conversations with parents, parent meetings, emails, records, assessments, samples of work. You need to prioritize what you're doing because this is very time consuming, so you just have to have a very systematic procedure and you'll need help for that. I found that if you have a good team and a person who's designated for more of the admin type work, that they can keep those files and systems going. Okay, because that is a really important element of showing progress and tracking a child's progress, is having those files available and having them up to date. Okay. Do you have an accurate register? How are you classifying? Are you following the DSIB classifications? Have they been updated? Are you keeping pace? Okay. Sorry. Now, who is registered on your register? How do they get onto your register? There are questions you need to think about and check, are you doing it correctly? Is this in line with DSIB recommendations? Is this what the school wants to do? Do they have a different system? Do you need a supplementary register? We have a learning support register, then we have a supplementary register. The supplementary register is a record of concern for teachers who raise concern or parents who raise concern about their child, and then we will put them on a register. They may not have an official diagnosis, but we understand there's something the child needs support with, and we're monitoring that child. We're evaluating, do they need further support? So they go on the supplementary register until a point where, if need, they go onto the learning support register where they'll have more formal, structured support. Okay? Now, the information that you're gathering and keeping, is it being used or is it just filed away? That's a big question. Is it available for teachers? What is available for teachers? They need to have a reference document. They need to have something at hand where if they have a class, they can have an overview. Who are my SEN children within this class? What are their main strengths? What are their areas of need? How can I support them? Some top tips. Okay, and that's something what Cindy talked about earlier. Apart from her IEP, she had an extra sheet which gave suggestions. Something we do is we have a learner profile, and it documents a picture of the child, their strengths, areas of need, and some suggestions for how you can support them, personalised suggestions for what they respond well to. So it's just one A4 document. Each teacher will have that for her class. So if she has 3 SEN children in her class, she'll have her folder and those 3 children will be documented there. If she had to leave and a supply teacher came in, they can very quickly see who are the SEN children. Okay? Along with that, there's also a copy of their IEP, which is updated termly. So those targets from the IEP are created in conjunction with the Learning Support Department and the class teacher, the parent and the child. Okay, and that's updated termly. So that should be available for your class teachers, your specialist teachers, as a minimum requirement. Okay, and they need to know that if there's extra information available on a child, that they can come and access that and where they can find it. Okay, those documents are usually confidential, so you need to keep them most likely in one central place, but staff need to know that it's their responsibility to come and read up on those children who they have in their class, and that information is there for them and you will make it available. Okay? All right, so the role of SLT, your senior leadership team, we talked a little bit about this already. They need to be aware of who the children are. There needs to be regular reviews. Something that works well for me, I sit down with my assistant heads once a fortnight and we review all the children who we have a record of concern and any learning support children who we need to update. Okay, so we're discussing cases every fortnight. Also, I would meet with the head teacher every week to review departmental issues and issues for the future planning, future development of the school and learning support. Okay, so you need to have that, they need to play that role because a learning support team can't do all these things by themselves in isolation. Working with your registrar and your school nurse is also really important. If the registrar is admitting children who have additional needs, they need to be very well placed within specific classes with specific teachers. There needs to be an overview of what needs are across the school and where you're going to place that child accordingly. Okay, so that classes don't become overloaded with additional needs, because that's an unrealistic expectation of any class and any teacher to function if there's an imbalance in terms of the spread of need in the class. Okay, so the registrar plays a key role in that. Also, the registrar is the first link to parents on entry. So if there's previous reports, assessments, the registrar will be getting them and passing them on to you and in turn on to the class teacher. Okay, and your school nurse is really important because children with additional needs, they could be physical, medical, hearing, vision. You need to work with your school nurse to check all these things and to ensure you have an accurate register for children who should be wearing glasses, who have hearing impairment, perhaps physical difficulty, maybe they're hypermobile, maybe they've got a coordination, developmental delay. These things need to be documented. She will have that information. You need to work with her, share with her, because if the information comes to you first through a parent, she needs to know it. And likewise, if she gets it first, you need to know it. Okay? The physical environment is important within the school in terms of access. Is the school disability friendly? Okay. Does it have disabled toilets, ramps? Yes, it should, obviously, now with building regulations, but if it's an older building, it may not. Okay, and that's something you might need to address with your SLT. And then the emotional culture of the school is around the inclusive values and the respect for diversity. Okay. So some of the bonus elements then that will help to build an effective department. Intervention programs and booster groups. You may want to allocate some of your support to short, medium-term booster groups. So it won't be long-term with one particular child, but you'll take a small group within a class and work with them on a specific area for maybe 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and then you'll review it. So it could be a fine motor skills booster session if you're in foundation stage or year 1. It might be a comprehension booster group in year 4. It could be an assistive technology booster group in year 6 if you're helping them with some assistive technology, maybe drag and dictate or touch typing. You want to improve their ICT skills. So consider how you can best allocate your timing and your staff to give the most effective support. You need to have access to good software programs. There's really good ones available that will enhance learning for children. It will also give them independence with their learning because they can carry it on at home. A lot of them are online subscriptions, so they can continue the good work you're doing in school at home, and it's child friendly and it's fun for them. These programs that are designed in a very child friendly way, so they're motivated to do it. a good array of diagnostic assessments and screeners within your school on entry for new pupils, for children in foundation stage, and then also diagnostic assessments if you need to further assess a child and get more information before you might choose to refer them to an outside psychologist or therapist for further assessment. Okay? It also gives weight and credibility to what you're saying when you're speaking to parents, that you can show them some comparisons and say, this is how well your child is performing, I have a concern, maybe we need to investigate this a little bit further. Okay? So it's good to have them. There are lots of good screeners and diagnostic tools available online as well, which we can get very easily. So if you subscribe, you can have it in your school within a week. Okay? You're not waiting for the CD to come from the UK, which is how it used to be. Okay, so input from external agencies then is very valuable. You can have a whole array of services brought into your school with the support of your senior managers. You could have occupational therapists, speech and language, behavioural. You know, we're not limited in Dubai by the amount of businesses that are out there, but we have to remember that they are businesses. They have an agenda. They perhaps may not be impartial in terms of needing to fill certain quotas, but at the same time they do provide a very valuable service to children and to families, and otherwise the children might not get those services if the parents aren't in a position to bring them after school, or perhaps they're too busy and it's easier for them to do it within school hours. So that's something to consider. Now, the natural distribution of needs and the sibling policy, this is really for your senior managers to consider and your registrar. What is their intake, their demographic of children? Are they considering the spread of needs when they are doing admissions? The most natural spread of needs you'll get is if you follow a sibling policy, that children who are in the school, their siblings automatically get priority. That will give you a more natural spread of needs, rather than being selective, where you may have very few needs, or if you have no screening process whatsoever, and you could end up with a disproportionate amount of additional needs within your school, which is a very difficult challenge and takes away from the effectiveness of what you can do. Okay, so that's something to consider. No additional fees for learning support. Very important, because if you're going to be inclusive, you shouldn't have to charge additional fees for that. These children are already disadvantaged, and their families, by the fact that they need additional support, they have challenges within their life. To charge them extra is almost unfair, especially in terms of inclusion and equality. Obviously the funding has to come from somewhere, but that needs to be built into the pre-planning of the school in terms of, you know, how they administer their finances, with the awareness that they will have a certain percentage of additional needs within their school. Your school counsellor, if you've got social emotional behavioural issues, can be very helpful. Not all schools have one. It's a really added bonus if you do, to work with that person. Children experience a lot of difficulties, social emotional, self-esteem, confidence, especially if they have additional needs. Also, anxiety is huge with children who have additional needs. It can really impact on their performance. And for typical children, they will experience social emotional issues all the time, so a counsellor will benefit all students within the school, okay, and should be really advocated for within your staff. Effective communicators. If you have parents coming from lots of different backgrounds and English is not their first language, or Arabic is not their first language, then you need to make some provision for that. So you need to have translators available, that you can have a conversation with a parent and that they're receiving the message in their language that they understand. Because if you're delivering a sensitive issue in a language that's not their first, things can get lost in translation, and the most obvious thing can be overlooked. Okay? As well, with written communication with parents, if they need that to be translated, that's important, it's done for them. And we can't assume that all parents can actually have good literacy skills. We can't assume that. So, especially for children who may have dyslexia or a learning difficulty, their parent may also have had that and still face challenges with it, so you have to be mindful of that when you communicate with them. If you find that the notes are never taken out of the bag, why? Is there a reason? Perhaps that parent is not comfortable telling you, actually I can't, I'm not proficient enough to be able to read those things. So you just have to be aware of that. Then wider collaboration within Dubai really helps effective learning support. We can all learn from each other, that's why we're here, and there's lots of different forums for that in Dubai, so the more we do of it, the better. And then clear guidance and training from DSIB and the KHDA I think is very important, especially with the drive for inclusion. We need to be given the right direction, we need to be given the right support, otherwise we can't do our jobs effectively. Okay, there needs to be pre-planning, especially if criteria are going to change or be expanded, we need to be informed. It's not okay to find out about that a month before inspection or 6 weeks before. It needs to be pre-planned to help us do our jobs the best we can. Okay, I'm going to show you a video which promotes inclusion in all its forms. Okay, I just think it sums up what we're here for today.
My challenge to leaders 5 years ago when I stepped into this role. How do we create a district where everybody's loved and not excluded, intentionally by design or unintentionally? How we do that is something that we're constantly learning, because it's a big challenge for us. When I think about inclusive education, learning is the core work of a school district, but in a school, we actually establish our own school-based community where kids have a place, get roles to play, and the adults work together with the kids. And so in that little community called the school, kids learn not only the academic requirements to learn about others, but they also learn how to get along, they also learn how to manage conflict, they learn a whole variety of citizenship skills and knowledge related to learning how to work and live together. We see some unique features in all the schools that are really the school personality that emerges, and that's one of the great features, I think, of paying attention to and being responsive to what's going on in the community.
onto a more elaborate concept.
In a professional learning community, and when we focus on collaboration, we say all students belong to all teachers. Collaboration is king, because it means that my child, your child, gets the expertise of 3 or 4 or 5 teachers working together to be able to determine how to ensure that that student is successful.
Everything you do is differentiated to meet the needs of each and every student by the skill.
By the student, by the skill. Those 6 words encapsulate for me specifically what it is that we do within the professional learning community. And I'm totally convinced that students do better in an inclusive setting than they would if they were segregated or separated into separate classes.
We're a school for all of the children who live in the community, whether you're, quote, regular or whether you have diverse learning needs. And how do you say that some kids can come to the community, some others can't? I think we're moving to a more strength-based approach where we look at diversity as a strength and something to be proud of. We need to really focus on instruction and high-quality instruction for every kid. And universal design gives us a way of doing that I think is improving instruction across the board. Inclusion is having everybody sitting at the table together, making everyone feel accepted and part of the team, that we're all here to help and support one another in whatever way that looks like. Children that have needs. What can we do differently with what we have? One of the resources that we do have is we have the people in the building and our time. Let's take a look at how we can use those to maybe look at it differently so we can help the children. So what the staff came up with was this idea of having time twice a day to work with a small group in the classroom. And the rest of the children went to what's called intervention time.
Opening a new school was a great adventure and filled with many interesting opportunities and challenges. Building an inclusive culture in this school was part of the philosophy from the beginning. We are a community school. Students who live in this community, this is their school. So our job then becomes, how do we provide learning and teaching for every single student who walks in our doors?
Our staff had indicated that they would like to have time to observe in one another's classrooms, both so that you're aware of where the students come from and where they're going.
As teachers, we own what we do in a lot of ways. Like in the classroom, the ambiance we create, we like to close that door, it's our world, and it's scary to sit with your colleagues and put it out there and say, okay, this is what I'm doing. Because then there's questions, and you have to be ready to answer the questions about it.
And I believe that we've certainly been doing inclusive education for years, and not because it's been a policy, but because it's a belief that we have about what's right for kids. We opened an academic support center. If a student needs an accommodation, such as a reader or an assessment, then the academic support center will provide that type of accommodation. And that also includes things like the extra time they may need to use a computer. We have students that are with special needs, coded ELL. We have regular students that come into academic support. Students can come down spontaneously. Teachers can call and book students in. I know that when they leave us, that they're going to be okay. Because we provided them with the skills that are going to be transferable for them in life. That they're going to be able to apply those skills to other situations in life, and they're going to do well. looking at the students and the needs of those students, and we plan how we're going to implement curriculum, given the learning styles and strategies we have in our classroom.
Through our inclusive project, we learned a few things. I think that we've learned that what we're doing for some of the students that have been coded and have been placed in our school, those are things that we do for all students.
Inclusion is not just breathing the same air as another student. You have to have the supports in place. If they're being successful in an inclusive setting, then it's the right place for them to be.
There's diverse needs, there's diverse learners, and we did with diverse teaching, and we have learning that looks like all sorts of things in all different ways in all different places. It's just doing what we already do and making it better.
That sense of growing up in a community and that everybody has some value and role to play, I think is absolutely critical. And if it doesn't happen in the classroom, then I don't know where else it will happen. As we learn that practice, our beliefs will change over time. And we need to learn how to do that practice and craft of teaching in this context well. And when we do that, then we're able to actually have an impact with kids and change attitudes over time.
Okay, so there were examples of lots of positive inclusion and how we can work effectively together to make inclusion work. Part of that is that the support from the managers was very realistic. They were working towards the same goal. It would be unfair to expect teachers to run an inclusive system and then require a certain level of attainment from all pupils, because that's not how inclusion works. It's about measuring the progress of each child individually and showing progress for them at their level. Now, if we think about what we can do to improve our own systems, I want you to think of 3 priorities for your school in terms of SEN and what you want to achieve in the next 12 to 18 months, because we have another academic school year. So you could build your plan over 18 months perhaps and think, what is it you want to achieve? 3 areas you want to develop or improve to make the system more effective. We can't do everything at once, so just prioritize and small incremental steps to get where you want to go. Who will be responsible for implementing that change and supporting that change? What is the time frame? Is it going to be broken up into termly review? Will some of it happen now and the rest of it happen in 12 months' time? And what support do you need from the wider school community? So bringing the staff on board, getting funding, getting resources, upskilling, providing training, bringing in external people. What is it that you'll need? So it's just, we all have our action plans, but it's just a thought as we end this year, going into the next academic year, what will your priorities be? Okay? And that's it for me. My email address is at the bottom. If you'd like to email me, you definitely can, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And I'll do my best to answer any questions. Okay? Thank you.